Well, thank you, Carla and Brian, and it's my pleasure to introduce both of our speakers tonight. We're doing it at once, and one presentation will follow the other. So let me start with Carla Jones, whom you've just heard from. Of course, she's our current CDHS president, and she joined the society in 2011. She immediately, which is Carla's way, volunteered to be our newsletter distributor, and then moved on to further roles as our secretary and membership director. Although Carla's career has been in the software business as a sales and marketing executive, she has enjoyed a long time love of history, especially in the local sense. We'll look forward to hearing from Carla as she speaks about Lydia Pinkham, etc. Rob Washburn is an award-winning educator in the journalism program at Loyalist College, where he teaches new and emerging technologies in journalism. A practicing journalist for nearly 40 years, he is known locally for his weekly current affairs radio show, Consider This Northumberland, covering local politics and community life. His hyperlocal news website, Consider This, is an archive of his journalism and academic work. Washburn is a member of the James Coburn Society and the author of several history plays about Coburn, the first Speaker of the House of Commons and the father of Confederation for Northumberland County. There's the official introduction of both of our speakers.
Madam President, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, if you are driving north on Highway 45, starting at the 401, you will climb a long hill. As you go up the hill, you will be entering an area known today as Creighton Heights. Once you hit the top of the hill, where the land goes into a plateau, on the west side, you will see a stone house with a split rail fence. It was built around 1843. Originally, it was the home of John Creighton, an Irish immigrant who went on to become a successful farmer, a businessman, and the reeve of Hamilton Township. It was also home to a young girl who would grow up to become one of the leaders of the Canadian Temperance movement, Letitia Youmans. Tonight, I would like to share the story of Letitia Youmans. From her humble beginnings near the hamlet of Baltimore to her international travels on behalf of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, her amazing life was lived during a drive for prohibition. It is a period of Canadian history we rarely explore. But like so many other historical figures, she deserves more than a superficial glance. I will attempt to make a case that Youmans' life and her activism are representative of a larger social movement at the time, especially women's suffrage. This was a period of great activism, which saw large numbers of women becoming agents of social change. It resulted in the redefining of women's roles within society and their subsequent empowerment. These ripples can still be felt today. Letitia Youmans was born on January 3rd, 1827, in a tiny log cabin in Hamilton Township. Her father was an immigrant from Dublin who came to Canada and settled on a small farm of about 50 acres near Baltimore. He was educated and was able to write and was good in math. He would work his farm in the summers and teach in the winters. Youmans' mother, Annie Bishop, was from Prince Edward County. She came from a prosperous family. We know this because when John and Annie got married, John had few possessions. However, as Youmans recounts in her autobiography, Campaign Echoes, she explains that her mother brought money from the sale of the family property, along with a good supply of furniture, 2 cows, and a flock of 40 sheep. The Creighton family soon outgrew the 50-acre farm, and they moved to a 200-acre property with a much larger log house, according to Youmans. The stone house I spoke about earlier would replace this one later. The family would continue to grow, and eventually there would be 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. Education was an important part of Youmans' life. She would start school at the age of 4, traveling 1.5 miles, mostly through the forest, to get to school. This first school was in a house. By 1835, Youmans switched schools. This was not unusual for the time, since education took place on an irregular basis as teachers and facilities were available. The new school was in a hotel. The teacher would run the hotel in the mornings and at night. He would teach in the afternoons. In 1837, she would attend another school. It was here, at the young age of 10 years old, Youmans would take a temperance pledge. It would lay out the foundation that she would build upon for the remainder of her life. Youmans would receive a very broad religious education from a variety of teachers. She would be taught by a Methodist, a Roman Catholic, the Reverend Alexander Bethune, a student of Bishop Strawn. He would prepare Youmans for confirmation into St. Peter's Anglican Church in Coburg. Again, this religious education would be seminal in her life, as we will see later. As the Creighton farm grew, the demands on the family were great. Youmans would put aside her education for 2 years to help her mother on the farm. The efforts paid off. The farm became more prosperous. This meant that the family had sufficient means to enroll her in the Burlington Ladies Academy in Coburg. It began as a Methodist school, an outgrowth of the Upper Canada Academy, which we know today as the original Victoria College on University Avenue. Professor D.C. Van Norman created the Coburg Ladies Academy in 1844. But the school moved to Burlington and was renamed. Within a year, Norman returned to Coburg to reestablish the academy under its new name. Youmans would attend both Coburg and Hamilton campuses to complete her education. Once done, she would accept a teaching position at the Picton Ladies Academy in 1849. Teaching would be a rewarding and fulfilling occupation for Youmans, but soon other responsibilities would come calling. In her autobiography, she admits marriage was not something that was on the top of her mind. In a striking passage, Youmans explains, quote, "The subject of matrimony had not engaged much of my thoughts. Whenever it did intrude upon itself upon my mind, the place I gave it was not where I would be happiest, but how I could be most useful. This is not a pleasing theme on which to write," end quote. She goes on to say that one of the goals of her book is to be truthful. Considering the times and the societal expectations, this is an incredibly insightful passage. It demonstrates her commitment to herself and her own aspirations beyond any social norms. This ability to seek her own path will be repeated many times during her life. Youmans would receive an offer of marriage shortly after her arrival in Picton. At the age of 23, she married Arthur Youmans on September 22nd, 1850. His previous wife died 3 years earlier, leaving him a widower with 8 children, some of them almost the same age as Letitia. Youmans is very blunt in her assessment of the relationship. She admits there is, quote, "the apparent want of romance in the affair," end quote. But she explains the attraction. Arthur's character is key. He was a strong supporter of temperance and a devoted Christian since boyhood. He was very principled. In fact, he would not sell any of his grain to anyone for the creation of alcohol. In her book, she also offers insight into the role of being a stepmother. Quote, "If the man whom you take as your husband has children, be sure there is a room in your heart for them, as well as for him," end quote. She also refers to the meddling of those outside the family who cast aspersions towards stepmothers. She scolds them, saying it causes unnecessary division and hurt. With the same zeal and devotion she will demonstrate throughout her time in the temperance movement, Youmans dives into domestic life in her new home. More importantly, Youmans creates a school at her home. She starts teaching local children from the surrounding farms. Just one more quick point before leaving this aspect of Youmans' life. Despite a lengthy description of the many aspects of her home life during this period that are filled with delightful stories, from making butter to harvesting maple syrup, Youmans ends on a dark note. She issues a warning about the hardships of farm life for women, something that continues to be relevant today. She recounts a visit to London, Ontario, where she visited what she calls an insane asylum. She is shocked to learn that the majority of patients are women, mostly farmers' wives. She asks the doctor in charge why, and he says, quote, hard toil and a monotonous mode of living, end quote. To mention this is yet another sign of Youmans' empathy towards women and their plight. Her sensitivity and solidarity are on full view. Domestic life would occupy Youmans for the next 20 years. She would start a Sunday school, and she would also become heavily involved in church activities. It would be at this time her awareness of the problems of alcoholism within her community would emerge. She recounts multiple stories of various families suffering from the impact of alcohol. And while there is a small local initiative to get people to pledge to temperance, we see Youmans slowly rise within the ranks to take a leadership role. By the summer of 1874, Youmans and her husband traveled to a Sunday school training conference in Chautauqua, New York. It is at this Methodist camp where she hears about the temperance movement. The speaker was Jenny Fowler, a founding leader of the American temperance movement. Youmans would learn about something called the Women's Crusade, a group dedicated to closing saloons, stopping the sale of liquor, and raising public awareness of the social ills of alcoholism. This is a historic gathering. This Sunday school conference will inspire a major gathering in Cleveland shortly after. It is there that the birth of the Women's Christian Temperance Union will take place. Youmans will leave Chautauqua charged with the responsibility of forming the Women's Crusade in Canada. This picture you're seeing is members from that conference standing in front of a grocery store protesting the sale of alcohol. I looked carefully through the picture, but could not find Youmans' picture. She will defer her leadership at this time, but promise to speak with other women to see what can be done. Prohibition organizations already existed in Canada as early as the 1820s. A Prohibition Women's League was formally created in May of 1874 in Owen Sound by Mary Doyle. She's the one sitting of the four women. The other three are her daughters, who are also involved in the Prohibition Women's League. She and others fought to stop the sale of liquor in her local grocery store. Historians acknowledge that this was the first women's Christian temperance union in Canada, even though it did not have the formal name. The second branch was founded in Picton by Youmans around the same time. Within a year, it would be Youmans who would become a major force in expanding the movement in Canada. She begins locally, spreading out from Prince Edward County into Northumberland and Durham. She would hold one of the first Wctu conventions in Cobourg. People would come from across the county. Like the group in Owen Sound, Youmans and other women in Picton took on the local municipal council to stop the sale of liquor. Youmans describes in great detail the challenge of taking on the local politicians. Since women did not vote or hold office, it was left up to the men on council to support the temperance group. Thankfully, there were some allies. Stephen Conger, the editor of the Picton Gazette and a member of council, read the group's petition into the record. After multiple raucous council meetings to packed chambers, the mayor called on someone to advocate for the motion to ban the issuing of liquor licenses in Prince Edward County. Unexpectedly, Youmans rises. She describes herself shaking with nerves as she addresses council, and in the process blows away the crowd. Her speech ignites a debate on council. The packed hall is brought to life as the crowd reacts. The second motion is made to withhold the liquor licenses and compensate the bar owners for any remaining stock. The second meeting is scheduled for the next night, but it is delayed due to a snowstorm. This gives the Temperance Union a chance to rally even more opponents. By the time the next meeting is held, the council chamber is so packed, People are outside and the police are there to keep the peace. And remember, this is in the dead of winter. Council is paralyzed. The concern is over leftover liquor stocks. And after some negotiations, the Temperance Union and its supporters agree to collect sufficient funds to buy the leftover stock of liquor and destroy it if council votes to go dry. However, it was not sufficient. Council voted to grant the liquor licenses. The loss would only inspire the group to aim higher. Instead of local licenses, the Temperance Union would go after the province. And so the group would use the Duncan Act. This gave municipalities the ability to go dry. The Wctu would go after every municipality and county council to stop all liquor sales in Ontario. Its ultimate goal would be prohibition. It would not be until 1916 that prohibition would be enforced with the Ontario Temperance Act. It would be repealed in 1927. The rest of Youmans' autobiography is filled with countless stories of Youmans' exploits as she travels across the province and across the country, organizing temperance groups. Each account is filled with sad stories of families ruined by men, women, and boys succumbing to drink. Youmans would gain further prominence outside Canada. She attended the first annual convention of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Cincinnati in 1874. Here, she would meet Frances Willard, a major figure in the American movement. The two would become fast friends. She will travel from the Maritimes to the West Territories and everywhere in between. She will assist in efforts to organize throughout the United States and the United Kingdom. The book ends with Youmans at a high point when she is invited to the White House to meet Lucy Haines, the First Lady. The picture on your left is Lucy Haines when she is young, and on the right when she is older. The purpose was to convince Haines to bring about prohibition. That would not come into effect in the United States until 1920, a full 4 years after it was adopted in Ontario. However, American prohibition lasted until 1933, a full 6 years after Ontario repealed its prohibition laws. Sadly, Youmans would never see her life's work come to fruition. By the later part of her life, she was stricken with inflammatory rheumatism in 1888. She is confined to bed, and there is little written about the later years of her life. Her autobiography, Campaign Echoes, was written in 1893. It was a huge success among the temperance supporters. Youmans died on July 18, 1896, in Toronto. The Wctu would be a major force beyond prohibition. Joan Sangster, the Vanier Professor Emeritus at Trent University and a longtime award-winning instructor in the Women's Studies program, draws a direct line between the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the suffragist movement in Canada. As with Youmans' life, it is easy to see how the temperance movement was able to provide an opportunity for women to establish their agency in the world and hence fuel their desires for more rights. The story about the local fight to stop the liquor licenses is a perfect example. We watch as Youmans blossoms into a leader, both within the movement, but also within the community and its political life. Even though the motion was defeated, Youmans and her followers were not dissuaded, but are further stoked to take on the crusade. It is also noteworthy to watch Youmans rise to greater prominence, along with greater influence. And while she would never see prohibition come into effect within her life, her impact cannot be denied. The Wctu continues to exist today. It is a worldwide body that continues to hold conventions. It claims to be non-denominational. The American Wctu is planning its 150th National Convention for 2023. It has become a social conservative movement, also expressing views on other issues such as right to life, freedom of religion, sexual abstinence before marriage, gambling, and censorship. The Canadian Women's Christian Temperance Union membership numbers are reduced, but it continues to be a member of the World Women's Christian Temperance Union. It focuses on educating Canadian society about the dangers of alcohol, tobacco, and other non-prescription drugs. The most recent numbers show in 1995, there were 1,700 members in 67 branches. That's compared to 85,000 members during the 19th century at its height. While Letitia Youmans spent her early life in Baltimore and Coburg, she rose to prominence and traveled the world. Like so many historic figures in Northumberland, this is her place of origin. Then they go off and they make their contribution. Youmans is a woman of her time, or maybe even a bit ahead of it. Her independence, her views on marriage, domestic life, her advocacy, and deep conviction to advance social reform are all manifest in the larger changes taking place around her. Suffrage, women's rights, the social gospel are all captured in her personal story. I hope you will agree with me. This makes her truly a subject of interest and study. Thank you very much.
We'll start with the Lydia E. Pinkham Medicine Company once again. And I think you may have heard me say this when I said that this is the face that launched 1,000 nips. The vegetable compound, which was the top seller, blood medicine, liver pills, and the sanative wash. And the key component, of course, were all the herbs in there, the cohosh, chamomile, licorice, and the 13, 15, 18, or 20% alcohol that was used solely as a solvent and preservative, and common herbs. So the dosage was 1 tablespoon 4 times daily throughout the month. Can you see this screen, Brian?
Yes, I can.
Yay. This is an excerpt from the New York Times, an article from 1971. It was entitled Pinkham Papers, Tonic for Nostalgia. The Pinkhams eventually reduced the alcohol from a high of 22% to 13.5%, but even small doses were enough to ensure popularity during Prohibition. Treasurer of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Kansas City, Missouri, did advise, "Dear sister, is your health poor? Do you feel worn out and used up? Especially, do you have any of the troubles which beset our sex? Take my advice, let the doctor alone. Try Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound. It is better than any and all doctors, for it cures and they do not." So given the times, a lot of women did not have too much faith in doctors at the times, and certainly surgeries were not always that successful. It's been said that 4 out of 10 women died during any kind of surgery. So if it was me and I had a choice between trying Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound or going under the knife, I know what I would choose. So this is probably a good start to the marketing. Can you see this image, Brian?
We can.
Okay. So this is a bottle of the Pinkham compound that's at the Northumberland County Archives. The bottle, both front and back, are really marketing pieces. In the middle part where I've zoomed up a little bit, you'll see that as well as the vegetable compound and details about it, on the right-hand side, the company is actually promoting their Pinkham's liver pills, which are for, liver, obviously. As well, on the side, the side view of the bottle, the back of the bottle is also its own marketing piece. You can see Lydia Pinkham's medicine. And in those days, of course, we're not recycling the way we do today. So you would be keeping those bottles, refilling them with whatever. And so it's a nice little marketing bit as well, too. See this one, Brian?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, sorry. So along with newspaper advertising, which is how the product was really marketed wildly successfully, there were always some featured giveaways. So we have simplified sewing on the left. We have come into the kitchen on the right. In both cases, tips for the housewife. And in the center is a pamphlet. And you can read the headline, which says 98 out of every 100 women benefited. Now, in this case, you could send away for a sewing case or a manicure set free. You had to answer a few questions, give them your name and address, send a check or a money order, and you would get your product as well as your freebies. This is one that Judith Gulen gave to me. It's a 14-page pamphlet it's dated 1928, both Lynn, Massachusetts and Coburg, Ontario. In this particular case, this page here, page 26, the headline reads, "Women from every province endorse Lydia E. Pinkham's vegetable compound. Write to a woman in your own province. You may feel free to ask her any questions. She will gladly tell you just how the vegetable compound helped her." So here in Ontario, I see there's a Mrs. Jeffries who lived at 50 Grandview Avenue, Riverdale, Toronto, obviously a supporter and keen fan of the compound. But again, imagine in that time, you're really reading newspapers and receiving letters in the mail. So if you're that woman, if I'm Mrs. Jeffries and I'm receiving mail from people asking me how I feel about the compound, I'm pretty excited to be answering it and to be part of this marketing juggernaut. I think it's dynamite. So, and obviously their page is filled with other women who are happy to reference you from Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, right across the country. We actually have this pamphlet, which we'll probably give to the archives to hold. But I also have the price list, which was in the middle of this pamphlet is an order blank. So you can order the vegetable compound for $1.50. This is the tonic itself. You could order the tablets for $1.50. You could have the blood medicine for $1.50. The liver pills were only 55 cents. And the sedative wash was only 55 cents. And it was in a new large 4-ounce size too. Still with me, Brian?
Go ahead.
Yay. So in addition to what you can find out on the internet, what I discovered was the great-grandson of Lydia Pinkham, Daniel Pinkham. He had a collection of all the financial, advertising, and general records of the Pinkham Company. He donated them to the Harvard University, the Schlesinger Library, and a lot of this information is available online. Some of it you have to reach a librarian to actually get access to. But in this case, from their online Harvard website, I was able to see 20 different booklets and pamphlets, and this one en français. So is that not amazing when you think about this? Because even 10 and 15 years ago, I would sometimes have to remind companies who were marketing in Canada that they needed to have bilingual brochures. So here they are doing this already back then. So let's talk about Lydia and the company a little bit. She was born Lydia Estes, married a Pinkham, Lynn, Massachusetts, from a family of Quakers. She was a radical abolitionist, as was the family. The whole family actually was involved in the founding of Lynn, Massachusetts Freeman's Institute, which was very active in the anti-slavery society. Lydia, mother and sister, among the first members. Such an interesting tidbit I found here. In 1842, the Freeman's Institute records show a 23-year-old Frederick Douglass is president. And yes, that is the Frederick Douglass who was the former slave, the orator, the abolitionist, and 22-year-old Lydia Estes as secretary. What a neat little tidbit to find. She was a school teacher. She married in 1843. She had 4 children, and the Pinkham's family were rarely well off. She began brewing her own, remedies of herbs and alcohol for her menstrual issues and other health issues as well, and started out by giving them to her friends for free. As time goes on, the Pinkham family realizes this really works, and so they've decided to make this a money-making opportunity. The whole family works together to produce, market, and sell the compound. They start with the typical handbills, direct appeals to pharmacists and shopkeepers, and place their first major newspaper ad in 1877, and that's what proved to be the most successful for them. The 2 elder sons, Daniel and William, were key in the early years. They were traveling salesmen, but unfortunately, they died a few years before Mom in 1881 of tuberculosis. The remaining children, which would have been a son and a daughter, and Lydia's grandchildren, took roles in the company from there on. And in 1882, it was incorporated, expanded into Mexico, Canada, and trademarks through all those countries that you see there. So the Coburg operation, the Pinkham business buys 128 University Avenue in October of 1916. The deeds are at the archives. Very interesting in that this little second piece that you're showing here, I would normally zoom this, but because today I'm having trouble, I'm just going to leave it. The deed itself asks that they be granted the right to access the Grand Trunk Railroad. It was first opened as a model school, this particular building, before the Pinkhams purchased it. It stayed a relatively small operation. From a Percy Climo text, I found that its first year of operation, they made about 500 gallons of the compound. You can actually visit the Sifton Cook website if we'd like to read comments from some of our locals who remember the building, remember the smells, remember walking by it. As I said, it's on the website. Really interesting reading the insight. And they were in business here in Coburg from 1917 to 62 when the operation closed due to declining sales, of course. Still with me, Brian?
You're doing great.
Wonderful. So the Coburg operation, when it closed, was bought by another Coburg company, Bird Archer. The later tenants in that building were two plumbing companies, Triangle Plumbing and Nyberg Plumbing, until 1998, when the building was demolished for the auto dealership that is there currently. The Pinkham business in the US closed in 1977, and Cooper Laboratories obtained the rights to it in 1968. No kidding. The products are available on Amazon today. And that is the image that I'm showing on the right-hand side. Go to amazon.com or .ca and just key in Pinkham and see what you get. In this case, again, I won't zoom as I would want to, but it's $29. It ships to Canada, and it's a package of 8 fluid ounces. No alcohol. Here is a postcard. This is really pretty picture of the Lydia E. Pinkham Medicine Company. You'll see printed at the bottom, Coburg, Ontario, Canada. And here's the back of the postcard, 1935. It's sent to a Mr. Peeble of Orange Grove, New Jersey. And Vivian sent it to him saying, "You can see where I am, in a hurry as usual." Isn't that neat? So shows the popularity of that particular building, plant, etc., to be a postcard in 1935. So what happened to the building? Well, this is a copy that I got from the library of the actual article printed in 1998. It's a heritage section of the Coburg Daily Star. This article was written by Valerie McDonald. There were 3 buildings in and around all this time under demolition consideration. And I've just taken 2 quotes from this article for us for today. The roof of the Lydia Pinkham building and the interior of St. Michael's Rectory at Division in Havelock are being taken apart, much to the chagrin of local historical conservationist Doug Sifton. With these 2 demolition projects underway, Mr. Sifton, LACAC, and the newly formed ACO are steaming ahead to save Whitehall, considered the oldest residence in Coburg, originally built by the Burnham family. So just looking at this thinking, October 1998, not the best of years for us. This is a bit of just a blow up zoom of the actual building in 1998. That's the photograph that was part of that particular column. It's looking a little worse for wear. So through bylaws and some minutes, I found that in April 1984, the building was designated heritage. By the time it rolled around to be August, September of 98, after Bill Halewood of the ACO presents to council, he's urging preservation. Well, unfortunately, the original heritage bylaw was repealed, and of course the building was demolished. I kept asking myself through all of this, why Coburg? Why would the Pinkham company from Lynn, Massachusetts pick Coburg? And I reached out to the Lynn Museum. Remember, the company is from Lynn, Massachusetts, and Historical Society. I contacted them back in August. Hadn't heard from them till this morning, if you can believe it. Due to COVID, of course, they hadn't really been operating full tilt. Anyway, the director gave me a call, how kind, and said that no, they had nothing in their records that talked about Coburg. And as a matter of fact, they had no idea that there was a plant in Coburg. And she said, thank you for letting us know something new about the company. There you go. I still intend to reach out to the Harvard University librarians and ask them if they would know of any of the records that they do hold that might answer that question. Now, we just know that Coburg through that time period was well known. It was an American summer colony. It's famous for its ozone, healthy place to be. There was travel via the ferry. I mean, you have that connection between Frederick Douglass and Estes, even though that's 30, 40 years before they bought the Coburg building. It's something that because Douglass lived here, lived in Rochester, pardon me, for 25 years. It was actually the longest he'd ever lived in any spot. Who knows? And of course, once here in Coburg, you had the proximity to the rail service and of course to larger Canadian cities like the Toronto and Montreal cities that you'd want to market to. This actually is almost the end of my presentation. I can't end it though without a few verses of a drinking song. I'm almost afraid to play it, but we'll try it. And anyway, I'll carry on. There's many variations, and this is the Ballad of Lydia Pinkham, which features all the cure-all claims. But first, I did want to say thank you very much to Judith for her initial interest in this subject back in 2014, and to the Coburg Museum, where you can find even more information. So Judith brought this really interesting article to the museum. It's posted there. You'll find it very enjoyable read. Abigail at the County Archives, wonderful job just helping me look at images and documents. And I don't know if you've read any of the posts of these gentlemen, these two old guys walking. They spurred my interest again in Lydia when they posted an article back in November of 2019. So here is, Brian, you still with me?
I'm still with you. Go ahead.
All right. So here is, this is a video I'm going to show. And if for any reason at the end of this video, I may lose you. So what I'll do is I'll just sign out and sign right back in again. But anyway, I'm going to play just two verses of it for you. This one is by a group called the Shenanigans, but the song and the tune itself has been recorded by all sorts of artists like the Irish Rovers. And there is a version, the scaffold version, which was released in November of 1968. It was considered a #1 hit in UK singles chart for 4 weeks at Christmas. The backing vocals were Graham Nash of the Hollies at the time, and Reg White, who we also known as Elton John. Can you imagine their backing vocals? So this is kind of a happy tune. I'm only just going to play the first two verses. It's fairly quick, but if you do want different versions, feel free, get out there online. And some of the lyrics, these are clean lyrics. I chose this one for its clean lyrics, but there's several bawdy and quite dirty drinking songs. So here we go. Thank you very much. Hopefully I will be able to return to the session fairly quickly after this.
Well, here's a story, a little bit gory, a little bit happy, a little bit sad. A lily the pink and her medicinal compound, and how it slowly drove her to the bad. Beat Ebenezer, thought him Julius Caesar, so they put him in a home, and then they gave him medicinal compound. Now he's the emperor of Rome. We'll drink a lily the pink, the savior of the human race. She invented medicinal compound, most efficacious in every case. Meet John.
So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. So sorry it was a bit choppy, but some days the technology gets the better of us. Thank you. Over to you, Brian.
Okay, thanks very much, Carla. That was good. I'll pass, if you can, let's see here. I'm just going to, there it is. If the attendees can send in their comments, I'll read off the questions and we'll have the speakers answer any questions. I have the first question. Letitia visited President Rutherford and Lucy Haynes. You had it as Lucy Haynes. I guess that would be to Rob. Rob, do you want to come on?
I'm
There
here. Yep. I already corrected the slide. It was a typo.
Oh, it was, eh? Okay. Next one is, was it the general poor quality and unregulated strength of alcohol that caused the issues of religion and its teachings during the late 19th century?
I don't know if it was necessarily the quality of the alcohol, but rather that for many people historically, drinking alcohol was a part of life, natural part of life. I think though in Upper Canada, and I haven't explored this in a lot of depth, but my understanding was that it was not unusual that surplus grains and other natural products, foods, would be turned into alcohol and sold in local pubs and saloons. So it was kind of like what they did with excess milk and creating cheese and other those types of dairy products. So it was readily available, and therefore a lot of people drank and did it excessively rather than drinking milk or water, which would have been maybe not as available. So that would be my understanding, but I haven't explored that in a lot of detail.
Okay. Thank you for your talk. Reminds me of Professor Bliss, who said, if the husband turned to drink, the household perished within the year. I guess that's a comment as opposed to a question. Any further comment on that, Rob?
No.
Okay. Rob, do you know the address of the Ladies Academy in Coburg, run by Professor and Mrs. Van Norman before she left for Burlington Academy?
I'd like to say that I could. I've chased this quite a number of times and come up empty-handed. My first impulse was to think that it was the building on Green Street that I think it was Faraday, not Faraday Hall, but there was a school on Green Street, but that's not it. And there was some idea that suggested that it may have been within Faraday Hall that they used part of the campus of Upper Canada Academy or Victoria College. But I have not been able to find the location or any references. It's going to take a lot more time, and I'm going to have to go to the land registry and do some searching in there before I think I can find out where it was. So no, I don't know specifically.
Okay, thanks very much. To Carla, I find it interesting that the WTCU end. Does that make sense? And another one, I guess a further comment, why did the WCTU endorse a tonic with 22% alcohol?
I'm not sure what the WTCU is. That could be for Rob.
That was the Women's something union, wasn't it? Women's.
It's the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
There you go. Yes. Oh, and so they're asking why they would endorse it. Well, Rob, I don't know how you'd answer it, but I think on my second or third slide, regardless of the fact that there was alcohol in it, it worked. They said it worked. And thousands of women kept saying that this compound works.
Any comments, Rob?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Mm-hmm. But it seems to me, it's so interesting, isn't it? And I mean, I thought the same thing too. That's why I included that quotation from the New York Times. It just seemed to work. And I mean, let's face it, not 98 out of 100 women will claim that it works and it was the honest truth. You think it was, but I mean, at some point, if it works and people are passing, this along to their friends and family, would they have read the label? Yeah. And it says the alcohol was for preservative. So who knows?
I wonder, just my question, Carla, I wonder if the LCBO back in 62, regulated, if Lydia Pinkham's potion had 17% alcohol in it, you'd think that I guess they finished their production in 62. You start wondering if LCBO had something to do with licensing the alcohol content in products.
Yes, and also the Drug Administration. I think that would be a big part of it as well too. That the drug. This is what I had read as well too. That in the United States, which is where it first started, and also just the cures. Like the actual claims that there's other documents there that I didn't include, but they talk about a baby is born when you're drinking the vegetable compound. It made you more fertile. All sorts of crazy claims. So. So again, I think probably there was a lot, to do with drug regulation, and certainly, as far as liquor control, good Lord, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be able to sell that over the counter today. And back in the 60s, I don't think either, but declining sales for sure.
This is for Rob. I know they mentioned that religion wasn't a part of Letitia Youmans' Temperance Union, but any idea what religion she was?
Yes, she was very evangelical. I believe for most of her life she was Methodist.
Okay.
And I believe the church she attended is still standing in Picton. There's also a plaque for Letitia Youmans in Picton. It's down by one of the parks, just off the main street.
I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to pass it over to Randy. Randy, if you want to finish up on thanking the speakers.
I sure will, Brian, and thank you. Let me start with Carla. Well, what fun, Carla, as you describe what I'd like to call women's snake oil. There was all sorts of those kinds of things going on. Most of them had very high alcoholic content, and Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound was no different. My dad used to tell me that the alcoholic content in men's aftershaves in the 1930s was high enough that certain individuals drank it. I imagine they drank it with something else to get rid of the taste, but. In any case, as you know, some of you know, I, as a former chair of the Alcohol and Gaming Commission in Ontario, liquor regulation is very close to my heart, and it certainly has come a long, long way since those days. Also, as another part of the explanation, and that is that many of those compounds had things like belladonna and cocaine in them also. So not unusual for sure. But you've brought her to life. You've brought an individual who had a big business here at one time, and we're very proud of our relative history with Lydia Pinkham. And thank you for bringing it to us in the way that you have. Rob, your chat on Letitia Youmans, née Creighton, you were thorough as ever on the accuracy of your history and your deliverance of that to us. Once again, you brought a local ancestor to life, and we all feel that we know her and understand some of her aims and desires as regards the sale of alcoholic beverages and suffrage. She certainly was a force to be reckoned with in her day, and she's recognized for that, as you mentioned, in Picton. And once again, we all feel, I think, having listened to you, that we know and we have an appreciation for someone who was in our midst some 100 and some odd years ago, who was endeavoring to make a unique contribution and an effort in suffrage and in the sale of alcohol at the time. So I say to both of you on behalf of the Historical Society, thank you so very much for bringing these two women to life for us, and to appreciate what you've done. Thank you again.